Hey, great to see you.
Likewise. Yeah, new change of scenery here. New environment for those watching on the YouTubes.
Yeah, we moved into Log Cabin. The Old Fashioned Dad podcast now resides. We are broadcasting to you from somewhere deep in the Mount Rainier National Forest.
Yes, it has a striking resemblance to the background of the Denim and Whiskey.
Weird, no
guy.
coincidence whatsoever.
Not at all.
Can't you hear the trickle of the waterfall yonder?
I can.
So perfect and serene.
Yes.
Well, thanks for joining us for what will hopefully be an entertaining episode. We'll keep it short because we know that you got plenty of things that you got to do. So with that said, we've got whiskey, we've got cigars that we must get to, as well as pretty good topic. So let's hit it. We are the Old Fashioned Dad podcast, seeking to love dads and men through the person and work of Jesus Christ, while entering into tough conversations on marriage, mental health, sex, and parenting, all while sipping good whiskey. So, this is probably a first for the show, and I'm not sure why, since the show is called the Old Fashioned Dad podcast. And we probably should video it, just for safekeeping,
For
right?
posterity.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that while here we go.
All right.
Here
Cheers.
we go. Let's see here. Do I got it? There. Ready? Oh, wait. Nope. We got to get it. There we go. 1, 2, 3. Woo! There it is. That's in there now. Okay, so we are enjoying first mixed drink.
It's good. And it's funny because it's old-fashioned is in the
Yeah,
name.
I think that's kind of what I was like. Why is it taking us close to a year to have a mixed drink? So we're drinking
because straight bourbon is so good.
It is so good.
It's so good.
We are drinking what's called a black Manhattan. And so the main difference between a black Manhattan and a regular Manhattan is the use of Amaro liqueur instead of sweet vermouth. And you also use some dash of orange bitters within the drink. So we'll do one more cheers. Cheers to that.
That's tasty.
And the whiskey that we're using. I'm letting my mustache and beard grow out so I can really taste the whiskey on the mustache and beard. All our listeners are really excited they know that now.
Yeah.
Is a whiskey from Virginia called Ragged Branch whiskey.
Probably have to get in there. Just right
Here, just like that?
Yep.
Ragged Branch. Okay, so it's got I would say, it's got a little bit of a bite to it, which I enjoy. So, we are also being provided some cigars from our good friends over at Standard & Twain. Love those guys. Now, I did something while you were setting up the mic, which was look up the actual cigar brand that this is, which I haven't done ever with these cigars. And so, do you want to know what your brand of cigar is?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, it's kind of fun for people on video. So obviously you have a cigar, but then they have a toe tag.
Yeah.
It's not dead.
DOA.
So they have this classy tag on it that just has a number and a barcode. So you can enjoy your smoke without the subconscious bias of you thinking you're smoking a good or bad cigar based on the brand it is.
And that's our goal here on the Old Fashioned Dad podcast, is being objective in everything that we do, and we don't want to be influential. And so, no, just kidding. We want to be absolutely subjective, and we want to be really influential. So your cigar and is being provided. Your brand is Dapper Cigars.
Ooh, Dapper. I like that.
Do you know Dapper Cigars?
I do not.
Well,
I'm a Dapper Dan man.
binder is Nicaraguan. Filler is also Nicaraguan. Wrapper is Mexican San Andreas. And I'm going to butcher this. The cigar is El Borracho. Okay.
Okay, that'll all be new to me, so looking forward to this.
So my cigar, I had to look mine up as well because, I want to know this stuff. My cigar is the brand Crowned Heads, which I hear a lot of good things about. Cigar is a Mil Dias. Okay. Wrapper is Ecuadorian.
Ecuador.
The binder is Nicaraguan. And the filler comes from Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Peru. So I think this is what's really neat, is you get to try out cigars that maybe you had no idea were high-end or somewhere in between, but you get to have this kind of
good.
objective experience with the cigars as he
good.
coughs.
Because I inhaled the second-hand
So
smoke.
really, I highly promote Standard & Twain. They're sending me a couple cigars just to try, and I have no problem saying like, hey, these are good cigars, and I've gotten to know the guys a little bit, and really good guys, just down to earth, not a big conglomerate company that's just faceless and whatnot. So I'm going to get into my cigar
It's tasty.
while you tell them what we're kind of jumping into.
Yeah, we are talking about. What are we talking about? It's right there. You told me.
Kids, and letting your kids take risks.
That's right.
Hopefully this will be
risk.
a short topic because neither of us are really great at that.
Risk taking. Well, I let my kid take all sorts of risks, but then my wife steps
Financial
in.
risks?
Yeah, I figured this would be a good topic. I don't know. In the grand scheme of our listeners, I'm not sure where we sit in the age demographic, but
A lot of 9-year-olds listen to our podcast.
I more meant like, younger, new parents versus people maybe in our life stage that are getting into middle age versus their kids that are out of their house or teenagers, whatever.
Right, okay, got it.
And so with, us being, I'm kind of on the cusp of Gen X, millennial, you're pretty solid on the millennial side.
81 is the cutoff for Gen X, so I'm going to firmly stick my foot in that camp.
Yep. So I was born
80
in 77. So.
82 is the beginning of the millennials. I'm going to stick with that.
Yeah.
I'm the Oregon Trail generation, people.
Yeah, we had Oregon Trail too. So, but I bring that up because there's kind of a, without getting too deep into it, it's kind of this unique micro generation that, in the context of technology, experienced both the text-based, the analog, and were the first ones to adopt digital with video games and iPhones and all that kind of stuff. It was specifically the internet, because I was a teenager in the early '90s, and so
When was your first experience with?
What?
When was your first experience with the internet?
With the internet, it's probably early '90s. I remember dial-up.
High school then?
Yeah, I remember dial-up, junior high, high school.
AOL.
But I also grew up in a family where my dad was a computer engineer. So I remember having Tandy computers and dot matrix computer and like pre-Windows. It is all text-based.
First MS-DOS. That's the
so
green
that's-
screen. And,
Yep.
yeah.
So that's what my dad programmed in, and we had a Commodore Amiga that was amazing for video games back in the day. But all that to say, there's kind of massive worldview shifts, with that generation on either side of that. People that either tended to grow up in the text-based analog world that didn't get the digital and rejected it, or those who came after us and didn't know the analog world and just assumed the world's always been kind of digital and there's always been the internet and the access to the world's information in your pocket at all times. And so, I know we've joked about, and it's pretty common in our age group, kind of talk about, back when we were kids, when you'd go outside and you'd spend your summers just playing outside, like no tether, no phones, just come back at dark,
Right.
Walk to school.
When the street lights come on, go home.
Right, and so it was pre-helicopter parent, and so the discussion about safety, the world's a much more dangerous place now than then, and I think that's just I think it's a falsehood. Because if you look at the statistics, it's actually way safer when you look at crime, specifically crime with kids and abductions and kidnappings and all that stuff. They're way down over 30 years ago. And so, my assertion is that because you've got, 24/7 news cycles, you hear way more about them, even though they're way less frequent. And I think that's a big part of what's created what we call helicopter parents, and
There's a new one now called bulldozer parenting.
yeah, and I think that's kind of the next step where essentially when a culture when the top priority of culture is safety, I think you lose a lot in a childhood, and just in your worldview in general, because you start framing the world for your kid that safety is the most important thing. Not living life, not being obedient to God, not taking risks. And I think out of that comes your bulldozer parents, where they start taking all the risks for their kids. They don't let their kids fail. They don't let their kids try. And I think it's just the natural outcome, I guess, of a safety first mentality. The next step is, my kid, will be, they will get good grades, and I will interject into their classroom and their teacher to make sure that, my little Johnny, my little snowflake, gets what's coming to him. And
you might have hurt somebody's feelings with that.
I might have, but the point is, kind of got me thinking about, what is the unintended consequences of a safety first culture where we don't let our kids take risks, like we had. I know it's popular to say, like, hey, when I was a kid, we didn't have any seatbelts. We rode in the back of the car, and we survived. Look at us, we're fine.
Yeah. Look at us, we're fine.
Yeah. And obviously, there's a balance to be had with not being a moron and taking unnecessary risks. Or just rejecting safety technology just because I don't know, you think that's cool to live on the edge or something. But I guess all that to say, where do you want to go with the conversation? I guess my premise is it's good. I'd make the case it's good for us to allow our kids to take risks and to fail. Let them fail.
Yeah, so maybe that's a good launching point. And take some time to smoke your cigar now.
There you go.
Yeah. So letting your kids take risks, I think, can have all kinds of good mental health benefits. It can have good physical health benefits. Now, I'm not going to sit here, at least on the physical health benefit side of things, and pretend like I'm a doctor and tell you, like, hey, take this as gospel and as medical advice that you should listen to. But as a mental health practitioner, I will say that there is some benefit in allowing your kids to take some risks because they learn cognitively and neurologically. Let me rephrase that. They begin to mature quicker. The brain puts together all kinds of neurological synapses that at a much faster rate when they are allowed to kind of test some of the boundaries of their environment. Now, that's not to say that as a parent, you should go, well, here's a pile of cocaine. I'm just going to leave it out, and I'm just going to kind of see what happens.
Sure. Here's my loaded gun.
Yeah, like, in no way, shape, or form does that constitute what we would consider, like, healthy risk-taking. Sure. And maybe that's some of the distinction that we should make.
Sure.
So, obviously, I don't know, maybe it's not obvious, but, leaving out loaded firearms and doing drugs or leaving out your drugs or...
I always put my drugs away.
You always
that's just goes without saying.
But, and having just, like, binge drinking nights, with your kids around, so that they can learn from that, not healthy risk-taking. Not healthy risk-taking whatsoever.
In case you're wondering where the line is. That's over the line.
And the Old Fashioned Dad podcast does not condone that. Okay. But I think there is some healthy risk-taking, like, let's take a small example. Small example?
Well, when your kid's younger, conflict resolution on the playground. Are we going to be parents that are constantly intervening and be like, oh, Johnny, be nice, share, or you kind of let them work out their conflict? Hopefully you've given them some framework for how to treat other people, and as long as they're not, have a kid in a headlock, hitting their face, you kind of let them work out their emotions and conflict on, sharing something, a toy or, that kind of thing. I think that's a healthy, it's not even risk, but it's more like allowing them to figure out their world and how to navigate it a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that can fit into, allowing your kids to take risks, because you're not going to be there to save them, especially, like, that's always the mantra that at least was beat into me. Okay, beat into me is real strong. That was taught to me, we'll say that, taught to me that, when you get into the real world, the real world is much harsher. And so you want to learn these lessons now so that when you get to the real world that you'll be able to, navigate them. So another example that I was thinking of was letting your kid walk home from school alone.
Sure.
There is some risk there. You know, we didn't get that opportunity with COVID shutting everything down of letting our kids walk home alone. And our you know, their school is really just around the block.
Sure, yeah, a block away. Yeah.
But even still, there was like concern in my heart, concern in my demeanor, I guess, that you know, even just that little short distance, something could go wrong.
Sure.
You know, there's that fear that we live, and again, going back to your point of like the internet's kind of made the world a smaller place, so you get to hear about all the bad that's happening all over the world.
So it feels like there's more of it going on than
right, yeah,
actually
like,
is,
well, somebody in China was kidnapped, so that's definitely going to happen to my kid, you know, in the matter of a block and a half.
Right.
You know, and there are some people that like they just generally kind of live in a paranoid state.
Sure.
And so like when you encounter those people, you kind of feel, at least for me, feel ashamed, like, oh man, maybe I shouldn't be letting my kid have some of these freedoms.
Sure.
Some
Like
of
maybe
these,
I'm a terrible parent.
Yeah, maybe I'm an awful parent.
Right.
But we have experienced, because our relatives, like my wife's sister and her family, they live maybe like 5-6 blocks away, down on the same street that we live on. And so we've allowed, over this course of this last year, allowed our kids to ride their bikes by themselves,
Sure.
all the way down to their cousin's house. And for me, that actually has taken a lot of effort to not want to like escort them, you know, because I'm like, again, 5 or 6 blocks, that's a little bit more.
Sure. There's cars on the road.
Yeah,
Who knows,
you know, like they're
talk
not
to
gonna
strangers
they're
or
not gonna
whatever.
ride on. You know, like I even stood as they were riding away. They get a couple blocks away and they start riding on the left side of the street, and I'm like, you know, like I hope that they see the oncoming car.
Yeah.
You know, and they, you know, they've survived to this point, and you know their mental health is intact, their emotional well-being is intact, which has led me to go like, okay, they're doing all right.
Right. Well, I think it builds some confidence, you know, at least for our son, you know, he's 9, like we've let him start to take our new dog on a walk by himself.
Nice.
Like, I mean, it's the normal route we go on, and he really takes pride in like, no, I've got this, Dad. You know, like I can do this. And so trying to give him more freedom to be able to do that kind of stuff, where he builds, you know, confidence and trust with us, as well as I don't have to, you know, go on every single walk.
Yeah.
But I think it's good because I mean, thinking about it, like I remember when I was a kid, I walked to and from school, elementary school, every day. And then when my sister's in elementary school, I walked with her, and she was 4 years younger than me. And so I was doing the math, and I'm like, I was in 2nd grade walking, you know, and I didn't know at the time how far it was. You know, everything seems bigger when you're a kid.
Yeah.
But I got on, you know, Google Map a few years ago. I'm like, well, I remember some landmarks. So I looked those up on Google Map, and I traced it out from, you know, where I knew our old house was to where school was. I'm like, okay, 3/4 of a mile one way. I'm like, you know, on a busy road. And my parents are like, yeah, you know.
Go for it.
Yeah. You know, and at the time I didn't think anything of it, but I mean, that's just what everyone did. We lived in a small town.
And I think that's interesting because, again, the internet has made the world a smaller place. So anything that happens over the course of the world, you know, could certainly happen in your backyard.
Sure.
And, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, I don't think that things were necessarily more safe. We just didn't hear about it.
Yeah, well, and statistically, they were more dangerous than now. If you look at, you know, FBI crime statistics, and this would have been
I mean, what else would you look at? That's what I look at.
Yeah, the mid to late 80s, you know, in Iowa, you know, when we're doing this. So, but maybe there's something different about, you know, kind of the Midwest culture versus here. You know, maybe that's still a thing in the Midwest. You know, I mean, I know kind of here in more progressive areas, you know, like Seattle, you know, you hear stories about, yeah, I let my kid, you know, walk down the street at a friend's house, and we got the cops called on us for child abuse, you know, because they weren't being monitored by an adult.
Right.
You're like, that's
CPS
ridiculous.
came and filed a report and all that.
I don't know how often that happens, you know, just like we were talking about, like you hear about, you know, the outlier things, because that's what gets news attention, you know.
If it bleeds, it leads.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
So there's a point that just keeps kind of ruminating in my head a bit. It just kind of keeps echoing over and over again.
Okay.
And it was something that you said that kind of brought this up for me. You know, as it pertains to kids and letting your kids kind of take healthy risks. I think because that's the point that we're trying to emphasize.
Sure.
Because it hopefully leads to healthy, development and adult maturation, and eventually sets them up to have some independence and be able to navigate some of the, difficulties in life.
Sure. Ultimately, it's trying to set them up to be able to make wise decisions. Eventually, as they become Christians, to let that the principles we've hopefully instilled in them and the Holy Spirit lead them. And if you wait till they're 14 until you start letting them make decisions or have any risk, well, it's a little late. They're going to be pretty non-resilient at that point.
I would agree. You should be a therapist.
Said no one ever to me. But okay.
So one of the things that continues to pop up for me in this conversation is, and I see a lot of parents do this, and I think I'm guilty of it for sure, is that when you're raising your kid, you are constantly trying to do one of two things, and that is give them the life you never had, or prevent them from having the life that you had.
Very true.
Yeah,
Very true.
And I think there is some correlation here with the topic that we're talking about. But in either case, both situations, giving your kid the life that you never had.
You wish you had.
Yeah. And usually that means like they get all the opportunities,
Sure.
they get all the things,
Yep.
Or preventing them from the life that you had, which oftentimes means like I came from potentially an abusive family,
Sure. Or we were super poor or whatever.
or my dad wasn't there, or one of the spouses wasn't there, parents wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes what that means inadvertently is that you as the parent are defining your kid's life by your standard.
So you're saying that's bad?
I'm not saying it's good.
Not-
Actually,
I'm
I'm
not
saying
not
it's
saying
not good.
it's,
It's not good because because if that is the rhythm at which you are engaging in your kid's life, if we're talking about bulldozer parenting, we're talking about helicopter parenting, and we're making sure our kids are set up for success, where is the autonomy? Where is the independence? Where is the healthy development? Because if we're raising our kids like this, the only things that I've ever really seen come out of that is if you're giving your kids all the things that you never had, there's the possibility that you're raising your kids to be spoiled.
Sure.
Okay.
Or too reliant on you.
Or too dependent upon you, not knowing how to navigate the stressors of the world. And or you're teaching them to be fearful of everything because you want to make sure that they never have the life that you had. So that oftentimes leads to, don't do this, don't do this, don't do that. That could happen.
Sure.
Those kinds
Sure.
of.
You make them paranoid.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cue COVID, which is another topic, but I've heard a lot of kids are just like paralyzed because their parents are freaked out about COVID. So
right. So I know this is kind of a hot take, so to speak, but it's one that I think about quite frequently. Is like, what does it mean to really allow my kid to take risks and to have kind of the development of their own personality? Like, I know as a parent to young kids, that's not going to be as prevalent as, say, like a parent to a teenager, or a parent to like a really, an old teenager, like 19 years old or something like that. But if we are constantly trying to take one of these two paths in our kids' lives, then are we doing our kids a favor? And are we really letting them have some autonomy in their lives and have healthy development? Or are we just trying to define their upbringing in their life by what we didn't have or what we wanted? How about that?
yeah, that's
Deep.
it's deep.
That's deep.
Yeah, it's good. Deep waters. Man, where do you go with that?
I don't know.
I mean, I guess I'm just kind of thinking, maybe for listeners, if you hadn't really thought about that, maybe this is a good time to, pause this and kind of reflect. Like,
Yeah, that's a good call.
are you leading with, the thing that drives you in your parenting is I want to make sure that my kids avoid the pain and struggles I went through as a kid, or leading from the, what was the other one?
Is giving them everything you never had.
Sure. Because those are two very common places to lead from in as parents, and I think it would be very helpful if you kind of understood that. Now I'm not really sure like where that that middle ground comes in, because I mean it can be very challenging to kind of figure that out, especially if you already have a pattern of, you know, dealing with your kids and like how you respond to their struggles or your challenges with them or their perception of the world, because you're probably, their perception of the world is probably going to mirror your perception of the world.
Sure. And so here's where I think some of the application can be on this end.
Okay.
Is that it's good and it's okay to allow your kids opportunities to take risks, because what that is allowing for is the development of their own personality. You can teach your kids from a place of like, you know, this is what I grew up with, right? Or this is what I didn't have. Like if your dad walked out or if your mom walked out, you can say, hey, this is what I had to grow up with. But if either of those places, like you wanted to simply give your kids everything, you know, in hopes that that's going to make them a better kid, or if you want to prevent them from experiencing any hurt, then what you're setting your kid up for is disaster. What you're setting your kid up for is failure, you know, and you're making sure that they're going to be absolutely dependent upon you and or hate you. And so allowing your kids on a case-by-case basis, depending upon their age, some level of autonomy, some level, like in your case, allowing your kiddo to walk the dog. You know, it's little by little. Like at 9 years old, at 10 years old, you're not going to say, okay, here's the keys to the car, go down and get a bunch of groceries. They might be willing to do it, but is it appropriate?
He's willing.
But is it appropriate?
Yeah.
No, it's not appropriate.
Yeah.
But you look at your kids and you go, okay, what is age level appropriate for risk taking? And the question is, as a parent, you should be evaluating, am I defining my kid's life based off of these two questions? What I didn't get and what I'm trying to avoid them having because of what I got.
Right. Well, I think this is a really, presumably this is mostly dads listening to this podcast, but I think it's a really good conversation to have with your spouse.
Yeah.
Because at least from my experience, I tend to be much more okay with allowing my kid to take risk in certain things. I mean, I'm a little nitpicky sometimes and do too much talking and like, have you thought about this? You thought about that? Like, not instead of just letting me be a kid, you know. But I also know that I'm much more willing to like let our son fail. Like if he's doing something risky, I'm like, yeah, if he falls and, you know, cuts his leg,
Hurts himself, breaks a bone.
you know, he'll figure it out.
Yeah.
As opposed to my wife, who maybe like won't let him do something risky in the first place. So I think it's a good conversation to have, just to compare the husband and wife with like what they're leading out of. You know, was their childhood one of like, I want to provide this or I want to avoid this, and making sure you're on the same page. Because I think men in general tend to be more okay with taking risk. I mean, you see that in the jobs they pick, in how they work, in their willingness to, you know, stock market. I mean, everything. You see, they tend to be more, less risk averse than women in general. So I think it could be a good conversation, just how that plays out in your parenting, and how you relate to your kids.
I think this is a good place to kind of wrap that up and
There's so much more to talk about.
I know. Let our dads and moms kind of chew on this a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess I don't want to draw this out too much, but I mean, I guess practically speaking, because I mean, our kids are relatively young still. I mean, what happens if? What's the natural outcome of this, or even unintended consequences of this? I mean, I've started hearing plenty of cases where people have kind of had this worldview, and they're probably not Christian, I'm guessing. They're kind of living out of a risk-averse worldview, and once the kid gets out of the house, gets to college, like they can't. I mean, they're a delicate flower that doesn't know how to handle conflict. They don't know how to handle people disagreeing with them. They don't know how to handle getting bad grades. They don't have their parents there to, always be. I'm sure there's some sports analogy there, playing defense or something.
What are some of the practical consequences of this?
Yeah, because I mean, if you're, as a parent, we don't allow our kids to have risk, or we're always making sure that they don't fail, stepping in to do that, they're never going to learn. They're not going to be resilient. I mean, they're going to crumble under the weight of the world.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've also seen borderline abuse of the other side where, you intentionally make your kid's life hard, and you're kind of a prick, so that they're harder. And I don't think that's the right response either. But
yeah, so I think what you're going to end up with is a kid that's scared of everything. And so oftentimes it's the parent that, as parents, we want to see our kids go out and thrive. We want to see them be able to go off and succeed. And and hopefully we expect and understand that they will encounter obstacles.
Sure.
We expect that they will deal with hardships.
Right.
But that's part of parenting, is that we coach them in that, and we know that they're not going to understand every single lesson
Right.
that we give them. But if you're trying to prevent your kid from experiencing any hardship, you're not letting them take risks, and you're paving the way so they have success all the time, you are almost assuredly ensuring that they're 100% dependent upon you, and you will constantly be kind of in, for lack of a better phrase, like in the toddler phase of parenting your kids well into their 40s and 50s.
Right. Well, and when they're younger, it may feel good to come in and rescue them and to avoid, the meltdowns or their disappointments when something doesn't work out. But like I'm getting to a place with our son where I can hear him, being frustrated, and I'll just let him be frustrated.
Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
see, if he can figure out a solution, and if I have to step in, it's not to fix it, it's to, how could we respond better? What are some solutions here?
Yeah.
Because his tendency is to be like, that's it, I can't do it, give up, and instead of being like, oh, here's the answer, here's the solution, I try to help him work through it so that he can become resilient, so he can think about alternatives.
Yeah, and I think that's a good word that you use, is resilience, because oftentimes that is what we're trying to do. And I think, because we haven't mentioned too much of Christ in this episode, so let's mention some Christ. How about
Yes,
that?
Christ is pretty central.
Let's do that?
Yep.
Yeah, let's do that.
That's good.
Is that, where do we put our faith when it comes to our kids and risk? And as well as just in general parenting our kids. Not every situation is going to be a risk situation with our kids and parenting, but
It is with the way I parent.
but every situation is going to involve with our kids parenting, on some level. And so as parents, we either are going to put our faith in one of two places. We're going to put our faith in ourselves to make sure that we get the outcome that we want with our kids. Or we're going to put our faith in Christ, that Christ is going to direct us and give us the wisdom and the discernment to be able to parent our kids. Because every kid is different, every kid is unique, every kid has their own personality. Like in the sense of the snowflake word, every snowflake is different.
Sure.
And so like every kid is different,
Right.
and has their own personality, and so what might work with one kid may not work with another kid. And so that's where, as parents, we steward our kids and their personalities and where they might thrive, because ultimately we're trying to help them thrive well. But we have to be asking ourselves, where are we putting our faith, especially as it pertains to our kids and risk? Is it in us to figure the situation out and control all the variables, or is it in Christ?
I think it's a good word. I mean, it's a good one to end on, because I know for myself, I have to remind myself that you mentioned stewarding our kids, just like our money. Like, it's not, my son's not my own. Like,
Right.
he's entrusted to me as a small human being to raise him up to be hopefully a contributing member of society who loves Jesus and is kind and gracious towards others,
Right.
for the sake of the gospel.
Right.
And if I put all that weight on myself and forget that really it's God who's in charge of that outcome,
Yeah.
I'm just called to be faithful with what He's given me.
Yeah.
That takes a big burden off. Then it also keeps in check, I think, our expectations of, like, I never went to college, I want my kid to have 3 degrees. It's like, stuff that's not necessarily bad, but may not necessarily be what God has for your kid.
Right. Yeah. So we hope that has been. Is this a good place to put a pin in it? Putting a pin in it?
Knife.
Knife in it?
Big Bowie knife.
We're going to put a knife in it.
Yep.
Because that's what we do here at the Old Fashioned Dad podcast. Once we put something to rest, we put a knife in it. So, with that said, we would love to hear any thoughts, comments, feedback from any and all of you on this particular topic. We don't have the final say-so on this. We're gonna leave that to God, and we trust in Jesus for our kids, and we would encourage you to trust in Jesus for your kids, especially when it comes to the topic of risk. With that said, we love you and we care about you, and we sincerely mean that. And so we're praying for you. I don't know every single one of you, but I do know a couple of you. And we are praying for you, and we love the fact that you are listening and you give us encouragement. Thank you. So please do check us out on the socials. And if you have 30 seconds, pop over to, the Apple Store.
Yeah.
App Store? Apple Store.
App Store.
The fruit store, Apple Store. I don't know. One of those stores. And, leave a review, because that will help us get our content out there. And please do interact with us on all the socials.
Yeah, we'd love to hear, the easiest way to get hold of us is just DM us on Instagram.
Yep.
We'd love to get to know you and hear some feedback and what direction you'd like us to take the podcast.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that'll wrap up this topic. Christian, good topic?
Christian, it's good.
Till then, peace.